In this short demo, we're going to watch how you can easily tap into the PowerOne APIs to scale out and scale in a cluster resource group, cover off reasons why you would want to do this, and illustrate it with an example scenario where this might be useful. So a cluster resource group, or CRG, is a flexible collection of compute, network, storage, and software resources. A VMware workload cluster is a type of CRG that you typically want to manipulate automatically using the PowerOne API. This type of cluster is created on at least 3 compute sleds across the compute domains and is used to host tenant VMs, which is sometimes referred to as workloads or payloads. As the environment expands, additional CRGs can be created to support a mix of different types of workloads and service level agreements. The PowerOne Controller manages and controls our PowerOne system, and it is responsible for the management of system resources that are deployed as CRGs at the physical layer. It is normally accessed through the PowerOne Navigator, an HTML graphical user interface, or through the PowerOne API. So why would you want to leverage the API to scale out and scale in a cluster resource group? Well, you may just want to automate the repetitive. Scaling out and scaling in may be something that occurs frequently and benefits from being done automatically. You may also have business logic or policies that you want to enforce with automation. For example, a fixed schedule whereby one workload is powered down or is idle and another one spins up to maximize the utilization of resources. You may be trying to take advantage of a utility model offered by a service provider or vendor where you are only charged for resources that are actively used, and scaling in and out automatically will help optimize the costs. Or perhaps you just want to integrate the autonomous provisioning of resources with your software development processes, spinning up additional resources for test cycles and pairing them back once completed. And these are just a handful of examples off the top of my head. I'm sure you could think of others where automation will make sense too. For this demo, allow me to paint a fictitious scenario where you have a small virtual desktop cluster made up of 3 nodes, the minimum number of compute nodes allowable in a CRG. As users log into the environment and more desktops are automatically provisioned by the VDI manager, at some point you may want to burst beyond the 3 nodes if resources come into contention and expand the cluster beyond the initial configuration. Now, of course, you could perform that task manually, but wouldn't it be nice if some threshold was triggered and the process is automatically carried out? So let's start by creating an alarm definition in vCenter. I'm just going to apply this to a single VM to keep things simple. It's not something you would see in production, but this is just a quick proof of concept. We'll give it an alarm name. I'll call this one PowerOne Scale Up. Set a trigger when the CPU usage reaches a 90% threshold for 30 seconds. And the action is to run a shell script on the vCenter server itself. A straightforward, no-nonsense alarm that runs a script which calls the PowerOne API to scale out a CRG. And we'll create a second alarm to do the reverse when the CPU utilization of this VM settles back down to idle below 10%. In turn, it executes another script to scale out the CRG back down to the starting size of 3 nodes. Now it's time to see this in action. We'll remote into the VM, run a trivial PowerShell command to force the CPU to 100%, and wait for the alarm to trigger in vCenter server. Jumping into the PowerOne API monitor, as the script is triggered, you can see the list of API calls being made to the PowerOne controller, which is then reflected in the PowerOne Navigator interface, resulting in the expansion of the cluster from 3 nodes out to 5. This particular demo has the expansion hard-coded, but there's no reason why you can't add some logic to get a bit more fancy with the business rules. Alternatively, you can leverage tools like vRealize operations or other external monitoring solutions using various metrics and heuristics to trigger the automatic scaling of your CRG. Jumping over to vCenter server, you can see the additional nodes being plumbed in, and with the distributed resource scheduler enabled, VMs would automatically get redistributed across the now expanded cluster. Watching this in reverse, the process is basically the same for scaling in the cluster. When the workload demand has dissipated, we'll kill the PowerShell command, which will drop things back to idle. then quickly clear the last alarm. Wait for the second alarm to trigger the scale-in script, which in turn shrinks our 5-node cluster back down to the original number of 3. During this process, the VMs are evacuated and the nodes are placed into maintenance mode and removed from the cluster, which can then be repurposed for other workloads in the PowerOne system. This concludes the demo. Thank you for watching.